Okay, fantastic. So today's webinar is on balancing life, but just before we start on the main body of the webinar, for the benefit of those who may not have had chance to tune into any of the webinars yet, Here for Health is a health improvement service within OUH that supports staff, patients and visitors on a one-to-one basis to improve their health and well-being in whatever that means for them. So we take a holistic, person-centred approach to guide individuals through identifying what matters most to them and developing a personalised health and well-being plan, which can include signposting or referring to further resources and community support. So if you would like to find out more about our service at all for you or any colleagues or patients, please do feel free to visit our website or get in touch via phone or email. So as mentioned, the theme of today's webinar is balancing life. Now, this was a popular request from previous attendees of the Wellbeing webinars, so hopefully it will resonate with many of you this afternoon. We also recognise that currently there is immense pressure on our teams across the Trust and acknowledge that aspects of what we cover in this session may not feel like a priority or focus for some of you right now. So with that in mind, we'd like to encourage you to approach the content of the session with curiosity and compassion as to what may be helpful for you either right now or possibly in the future. This session follows on nicely from the one 2 weeks ago, facilitated by Rachel Woolrich from the psychological medicine team. Rachel explored resilience and balance in challenging times. Within that webinar, we were encouraged to recognise the breadth of our life pie chart and the aspects that make up the various areas of our life, as well as our values. It also provides ideas and opportunity to identify what activities nourish the different aspects of our life and the values that underpin them. And we looked at considering what could control and what we could connect with in a flexible manner without pressurizing ourselves to do more. So I'd like you to sort of carry the ethos and theme of Rachel's session forward and into what we're going to cover today. So I'd like to start with actually, what does balance mean to you? There are so many things that we have to balance in our lives, often without even realizing it. So it could be things like work, family, play or leisure, relaxation, caring for others, caring for ourselves, and also social, political, environmental and religious beliefs and activities. And that's naming only a few. Finding balance in our lives is so important, yet it can be so hard. There are mountains of books and articles about it. I did a Google search of how to find balance in your life, and it brought up hundreds of thousands of results. And I also thought, as part of this webinar, it could be reassuring to know we're not alone in our experiences. So I'd like to invite you, if you're happy to do so, to share what you find challenging or helpful about life balance in the chat section. Natasha and Christine will be keeping an eye on the comments and highlighting themes and ideas that may arise as we go along. And just to share a tip that another colleague within the Here for Health team recently shared with me, is that to help them draw awareness to their current balance and develop sort of a better approach for them, they highlighted activities in their diary according to whether they are work related. So they highlighted them in pink, if they were life admin in blue, or fun or restful activities in green. And it gave them a visual perspective of what their current life balance looked like and allowed for a more conscious effort to include more of the green activities, as that they said that's what was often lacking. So I'd just like to draw your attention to a key point that many authors on the topic of balance seem to miss, and that's that finding balance is actually an ongoing lifetime project. It's not a finite goal at the end of which you have a peaceful, calm and meaningful life. It's actually a way of living. It's a process. And I thought it might be helpful to sort of visualize this in terms of the equinox. So the equinox is a place of balance between day and night, dark and light. It's marked as a whole day on the calendar, but actually in reality, it's not a whole day. It's not even a few minutes. It's actually just a fleeting moment. The instant it occurs, the balance tips. So are there any comments that have come up at all?
Not at the moment. I was going to type one saying family time, find it difficult to find family time in terms of balance, but I can see we've got one from Eliana. She doesn't know what the ideal balance is. If she put more effort into her own personal time, she feels guilty for her partner and work, etc.
Okay, yeah, I think that's often something that a lot of people carry is sort of the guilt, and they're always looking at what might be missing. So hopefully as we go through the webinar today, it might help you sort of alleviate some of that, some of those feelings, and actually take a broader sort of approach and view to balance. So as we're going through, remember that you're actually always in transition. So the key to living a balanced life is to keep in mind that balance is the process of holding something steady during change. So the process in itself will have ups and downs, its successes and its challenges. So try not to be self-critical when your balance feels disrupted. Both accomplishments and failures are actually part of balance. So most of us have plenty of both failures and accomplishments in our lives, but we may not always pay equal attention to both. So if you are someone who focuses on your failures, perhaps try to notice small moments of success to see what that feels like for you. So even at the best of times, many of us struggle to achieve life balance. And at this particular stressful, uncertain time, we may feel close to burnout, and that we're not balancing aspects of our life in the way that we would ideally like to. So during the coronavirus lockdown, it has for many become harder and harder to maintain that work-life balance or find time for relaxation, whilst also trying to cope with the pressures of work and stay informed about what's going on around us. So therefore, it's really understandable that people may be feeling tired, confused, and nervous about what the future will bring. The pandemic has thrown everyone's work-life balance off kilter, and to get it back on an even keel and re-find a balance will be a very personal experience. So what I'd like to now go on to is actually looking at what are some of the things that actually might help. So I'm going to share with you 5 top tips. There's a summary on the slide. I'm going to go into a bit more detail on each one as we're going through. So first of all, tip number 1 is what we covered in the previous slide, is that keeping in mind that balance is not a final goal or a destination, but an ongoing process. Being balanced does not mean being calm, relaxed, and content all of the time. Balance often occurs only for a fleeting moment, such as with the equinox, but it can reappear over and over again. So rather than trying to stay balanced, it can be helpful to think of yourself as practicing balancing. So tip number 2 is actually prioritizing. So decide what tasks or areas are most important and doing them first. Often the problem is figuring out just what is most important on any given day, in any given moment. Actually, what is your priority? But it can be helpful once you decide on what's important to focus on that and get it done, and to re-examine your priorities regularly. Sometimes just getting started can be a great first step. And so it's important also to briefly reflect once we have got a task done, and to praise ourselves for achieving what we've managed to do before we start to tackle the next one. So just a few minutes of grounding ourselves in this way to appreciate our accomplishments can help us just feel like we're not on a relentless escalator. Okay, so linked in with prioritizing can actually sometimes be setting goals. And it can be really helpful to have a long-term strategy as well as short-term tactics. So strategy would be the big picture, the long-term goal, and the tactics are the combination of short-term goals that help you get to that overall bigger picture. So think about what you can realistically expect of yourself and attempt to figure out how you can actually get yourself to follow through. So often people are tempted to make goals such as, I'll go to the gym every day this week, when they're wrapped up in the enthusiasm and motivation to make that change initially. So this might be unrealistic and also leave you feeling so sore and overworked that actually you don't want to go back for months, and it has the complete opposite effect to what you started out to do. So if you don't go, then you beat yourself up and you end any potential sense of balance that you were striving for. So for instance, if you haven't been active for a while, your long-term goal might be to get into shape, but perhaps it would be more useful to say to yourself that you're going to try and find a way to live that allows you to maintain your physical well-being. So short term, you might think about starting slowly in manageable ways that you can work into your life and gradually over time, as you get stronger, expand on what you're able to do. So tip number 4 is to be specific, and this can really help with your goals and in terms of your perceptions of balance. So when you are specific, it could be more useful to say, for instance, I'm going to spend an hour alone with each child sometime this week, than to say I'm going to have quality time with each of my children. So quality time is a great concept, but it's also quite a vague one. And since it is so vague, it can be hard to know whether or not you've accomplished that goal, which then makes it hard to feel in balance. So the same is true if you say that you're going to eat healthily or exercise more. So it might be easier to set something specific. So for example, this week I'll add kale to 3 meals, or I'll have fruit with my breakfast every morning. Or you might decide that you'll walk up the stairs at least twice a day, every day when you're at work, instead of using the lift. And finally, something which people often can overlook when it comes to balance is the concept of interactive support. So it can actually be a lot easier to find balance with another person. So the key word here is actually interactive. So if you're bearing all the weight, you can't get balanced. But if you're not carrying your share, you won't get balanced either. But actually, what's even more important is not how much weight one person carries at any given time, but actually how you interact with one another, drawing from and giving energy to each other. And that's what you could consider balance. And that interactive support could be in different realms of life. So you might have interactive support at home, or it might be at work, or it might be in a social sort of context as well. It's really being able to identify where your interactive support lies. So any comments at all that need addressing, Natasha?
Nothing so far, Emma.
Okay, excellent. Makes my life easier as we're going through. Please don't be shy though. If you have got any sort of ideas or things that come to you, whether it's from the slide we're currently on or something that's sort of come to you after the slide's been, do pop it down because we will have time at the end to go through. So bringing it back to the here and now, staff in the trust at OUH, the pandemic has brought an enforced change in lifestyle for most people, which we're all responding to in different ways. I therefore thought it might be helpful to take a moment to reflect on some of the comments and life balance tips that staff at the hospital have been kind enough to share, in the hope some may resonate and be helpful for you. So please feel free to put any personal hints or tips as to what you find helpful in the chat function as we're going through, or whether you sort of agree or can relate to the ones that have been said. So there's 7 different sort of themes for the hints and tips, and as we go through, I'll give the overall title, like make a plan, and then there's normally 1 or 2 sort of quotes from OUH staff I would like to share. So the first one is making a plan. So an employee within the trust said that lockdown is making them reflect on work-life balance. It's made them reassess some of the things they do. Things have been put on hold in their life and career, which moving forward, they want to make a plan to change. Another tip that came out, or a common theme, was to have some downtime. So there's a couple of comments here. So first one, I usually have a social life to blow off steam. That's definitely missing and I'm really feeling it. I'm very sociable, so it's weird for me to go from having this really intense job to a big void when I get home. As a doctor, I don't want to meet people who aren't working in the hospital and put them at any risk. That's why I moved out of my house share and I'm temporarily living alone. Having perspective keeps me going. I'm trying to meet my basic needs, so eat, sleep, and do something physical to be more active. I've also been listening to a lot of music. So that was a comment from a doctor within the trust. And we also had another one from a member of staff who's working at home. So for me, getting up and going for a walk outside is a lifesaver these days that I work from home. It's so easy to become stationary, glued to a screen without realising I haven't moved for a while. The time away from my work or even thinking about the current situation really refreshes me. Okay, so the next two themes are remembering the good stuff and also connecting with nature and the outdoors. So if I start with the remembering the good stuff. So within this one, there's two quotes again. So the first one is working life during the pandemic has been pretty intense and it's been hard to manage a work-life balance. It's been really important for me to reflect on the good times with friends and family. I've also had great moments of laughter and camaraderie with work colleagues. Life is full of ups and downs and it's important to remember the sunshine. And then another one is one of the most rewarding things is having a great team to work with. It was one of the reasons I chose this profession. To see teamwork and how everyone is trying their best is really rewarding, especially the nurses, as it's their care that really makes a difference where I work. So I think there's some really sort of personal and meaningful comments that I'm hoping will also, touch and resonate with those of you watching the webinar today. So connecting with nature and the outdoors. So it's just one part of one quote to this one. So during lockdown, I've been able to explore Oxford's beautiful parks after work. Appreciating the beauty of nature really helps me recover and relax from our busy hospital everyday job and very tiring PPE. And it keeps me fit and healthy too. Apart from the obvious physical benefits, there are studies that have also found that being active outdoors lifts your mood and helps depression and anxiety. And this is definitely something I've experienced. So some other themes are looking after yourself and sticking to your routine, and also prioritizing yourself came under sort of the looking after section as well. So I've got one looking after yourself quote and one prioritizing you quote. So looking after yourself, the staff member said, the pandemic has been difficult for everyone. Both my partner and I have worked very long hours during the lockdown period, and we haven't found much time for each other. Recently, before the second lockdown, we were able to spend 2 days away. We agreed to completely switch off from work and just focused on each other. The difference in my emotional resilience when I came back to work on Monday was noticeable and just reinforced the importance of looking after yourself. And then for another member of staff, it's got prioritising themselves. So for my own physical and mental well-being, it's important that you take time for what's important for me. Exercise, creative hobbies, getting outside for a walk, reading and rituals of self-care often get abandoned because we're too busy with our family and work obligations. I found prioritising 15 minutes a day that are solely for me hugely beneficial. And balancing activities that are necessary with ones that you do simply for pleasure. Make time in the day to do things that nourish you and fill you with a sense of well-being. And so that one really sort of connects well with the webinar from 2 weeks ago. Okay, so with regard to sticking to your routine, we've got from some people working at home, I think that they found this the biggest sort of impact in some ways. So one quote says, working from home, I found it hugely beneficial to treat the week the same as I would a normal working week. That means waking up at 6 a.m., having breakfast, showering, shaving, and putting a shirt on ready to go to work. Putting distinct brackets around my working day with routine habits has helped me to mentally separate between work mode and home life. It also helps to bring a tiny shred of normality to this unpredictable situation. However boring routine sounds, we're all creatures of habits. Any prolonged stint outside of what's typically normal in our day-to-day lives is bound to take its toll. Adapting to a brand new schedule working from home and only leaving the house for all but necessities has been tricky, and having these brackets around my day has really made a difference. So finally, some of the ideas that staff came up with is actually checking in with yourself. So just someone said that if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's important to check in with yourself and see what's really going on. It's important to acknowledge your feelings and express them. If it all gets too much, don't be afraid to seek additional support or professional help. So don't know if any comments have come up while I've been going through those at all.
No, nothing at the moment.
Very quiet. Okay. So hopefully our time today and some of the sort of experiences of other AUH staff I've been able to share has provided some ideas for balancing life roles and demands during this time. As always, it can be really useful to consider what you might take away from this webinar in order to inform how you may wish to support your well-being. So it might be considering your own personal what matters to you and why, or it could be a specific aspect to focus on that resonated with you and how you might get started with this or keep it going if it's something you've recognised is supporting the process of balance. If you would like further information or support in talking this through or in devising your own health and wellbeing plan to support the process of life balance, please feel free to contact the Here for Health team. Our details will appear on the next slide. But other options include your go-to support systems at home and at work, your team's designated health and wellbeing lead, and also there's a trust guide to health and wellness on the trust website. And this guide is categorized into 6 dimensions of health and wellbeing, making it easier for you to select what is most relevant to you and is being continuously updated to provide the best support for staff. So if you can just take a moment to actually have a think about, if you want to share, you can do so, but it's very, as we said at the beginning, a very personal sort of experience of how you might go through the process of balance. Have a think about what it is that's either resonated or that you'd like to take home with you from this.
We've got one comment, if you're happy for me to share, Emma.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
From Eliana. I think I have realised that balance isn't something else for me to achieve and potentially fail at, but it's a process where I can learn about what matters to me and ensuring my week has a little bit of everything alongside work. And I love her example, for example, pancakes today.
Hey, that sounds nice. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's lovely. That's exactly the kind of thing I was hoping people could take away. So that's really good to hear.
Said thank you for a thought-provoking webinar.
Brilliant. Thank you for your contributions. So this brings us to the end of the webinar today. Our contact details for the Here for Health team are up on the slide. Natasha, Christine and I will stay on to allow for a chance for questions, queries, comments or discussion if it's something that would interest you to do so. But if Christine, you could stop the recording now, that would be great. And I will also
We have one other comment, Emma.
Okay, yeah.
This guest says, I really struggle